Sarah Martinez stepped off the transport truck at the NATO training camp in Poland, her worn duffel bag slung over her shoulder. The November wind cut through the morning air like a blade, but she didn't flinch. Around her, soldiers from different countries were unloading their gear, talking in various languages, preparing for the joint training exercise that would last 3 weeks. At 28, Sarah looked younger than her age, standing just 5 feet 6 inches with a lean build that some might call small. Her dark hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, and she wore standard military fatigues that seemed slightly too big for her frame. Nothing about her appearance suggested she was anything special. The first group of soldiers she encountered were Americans from the 82nd Airborne Division. They were gathered near the barracks, smoking cigarettes and sizing up the other participants. "Look what we got here," said Sergeant Mike Crawford, a bulky man with arms covered in tattoos. He nudged his buddy, Corporal James Wilson, another desk jockey trying to play soldier. Sarah walked past them without making eye contact, focusing on finding her assigned quarters. She had learned long ago that responding to such comments usually made things worse. "Hey, sweetheart," Crawford called out louder. "You sure you're in the right place? The secretarial pool is back in Brussels." A few other soldiers laughed. Sarah kept walking, her jaw tight but her expression neutral. She had dealt with this kind of treatment before, though it never got easier. The camp was buzzing with activity. There were British SAS members, German GSG-9 operators, French Foreign Legion soldiers, and elite units from a dozen other countries. This was supposed to be a training exercise for the best of the best, designed to improve cooperation between NATO forces. Sarah found her bunk in the female quarters, a small building that housed only 6 women among the 200 participants. Her roommate was Lieutenant Anna Kowalski from the Polish Special Forces, a tough-looking woman with short blonde hair and scars on her knuckles. "American?" Anna asked in accented English as Sarah unpacked her few belongings. "Yes," Sarah replied simply. "What unit?" Sarah hesitated for just a moment. "Army Intelligence." Anna nodded, though her expression suggested she wasn't impressed. Intelligence personnel weren't usually sent to combat training exercises unless they were field operatives, and Sarah didn't look like someone who spent time in dangerous situations. That first day during the briefing, Sarah sat in the back of the large tent while a British colonel explained the exercise parameters. They would be divided into mixed teams and face various scenarios including hostage rescue, urban warfare, and survival training. Points would be awarded based on performance, and the winning team would receive recognition from NATO command. As the colonel spoke, Sarah noticed more stares and whispered comments. She was clearly an outsider, and not just because she was one of the few women. Her uniform had no special unit patches, no ranger tabs, no indication that she belonged with these elite soldiers. After the briefing, during the first meal in the mess hall, the comments became more direct. "I heard they're letting anyone into these exercises now," said a British SAS captain loud enough for Sarah to hear. "Next thing you know, they'll be inviting Boy Scouts." A German GSG-9 operator leaned over. "Maybe she's here to take notes for the real soldiers." Sarah ate her meal in silence, mechanically chewing the tasteless military rations. She had been through worse than verbal harassment, much worse. But she couldn't let these men know that, not yet. Maybe not ever. The afternoon brought physical fitness tests. Sarah performed adequately but not exceptionally. She ran the obstacle course in a respectable time, did the required number of push-ups and sit-ups, and completed the rope climb without obvious difficulty. But she wasn't the fastest or the strongest, and that gave her critics more ammunition. "See, I told you," Crawford said to his group as they watched her finish the rope climb. "She doesn't belong here. This is supposed to be for warriors, not office workers." That evening, as Sarah was reading a technical manual in her bunk, Anna approached her. "Why are you really here?" the Polish woman asked directly. Sarah looked up from her book. "What do you mean?" "This exercise is for special operations personnel, combat veterans, people who have seen action. You..." Anna paused, studying Sarah's face. "You seem different." "Different how?" "Quiet, too quiet. Like you're hiding something." Sarah returned to her book. "I'm here to learn, just like everyone else." But Anna wasn't satisfied. "Your hands," she said, pointing. "They have calluses, but not from office work. And the way you move, it's controlled, deliberate. Military training, but not regular army." Sarah closed her book and met Anna's gaze. Sometimes appearances can be deceiving. "Yes," Anna agreed. Sometimes they can be. That night, Sarah lay in her narrow bunk listening to the sounds of the camp settling down for the night. Through the thin walls, she could hear continued conversations about the paper, Pusher, who somehow got invited to play with the real soldiers. She closed her eyes and tried not to think about the last time she had been underestimated. It was in Afghanistan 3 years ago, when her cover as a cultural liaison officer had been perfect. No one suspected that the quiet woman helping with translation and local customs was actually gathering intelligence on a high-value target. No one suspected until it was too late. Her hand unconsciously moved to her back, where beneath her shirt lay a tattoo that told a very different story than the one these soldiers were imagining. But that was a secret she had sworn to keep, even if it meant enduring their mockery and contempt. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities for her fellow soldiers to underestimate her capabilities. Sarah had learned to use that underestimation as a weapon, though she hoped she wouldn't need to demonstrate just how dangerous that weapon could be. The second day began before dawn with reveille echoing across the camp. Sarah was already awake, sitting on the edge of her bunk, when the bugle call sounded. She had learned long ago that sleep was a luxury that could be interrupted at any moment. The morning brought team assignments. Sarah found herself grouped with Crawford and Wilson from the 82nd Airborne, 2 British paratroopers, a German sniper, and a French demolitions expert. When the team leader, Captain David Reynolds of the British SAS, read her name from the list, several team members exchanged skeptical glances. "Brilliant," Crawford muttered. "We get the secretary." Captain Reynolds was a professional soldier with 15 years of experience, but even he seemed uncertain about Sarah's presence. During their first team meeting in a small briefing room, he tried to be diplomatic. "Right, we need to assess everyone's capabilities to assign roles effectively," he said, consulting his clipboard. "Martinez, what's your background?" "Army intelligence," Sarah replied. 7 years of service. "Combat experience?" asked Hans Müller, the German sniper. Sarah paused. Some. Crawford laughed. "Lady, some doesn't cut it here. We need specifics. How many deployments? What kind of operations?" "Classified," Sarah said simply. This brought more laughter from Crawford and Wilson. "Oh, classified," Wilson mocked. "I bet you filed classified reports about coffee supplies." Even Captain Reynolds looked frustrated. "Look, Martinez, we need to know what you can do. This exercise is competitive, and frankly, we're here to win." Sarah understood their concern, but she couldn't explain that her 7 years of service included operations that didn't officially exist. She couldn't tell them about the 3 months she spent embedded with Taliban fighters, gathering intelligence that prevented a major attack on coalition forces. She couldn't mention the assassination in Syria that was blamed on a rival terrorist group, or the rescue operation in Somalia that was never reported in any official capacity. "I can handle myself," was all she said. The first tactical exercise was urban warfare simulation in a mock village built on the campgrounds. Each team had to clear buildings, rescue hostages, and neutralize threats while being scored on speed, accuracy, and civilian safety. Sarah was assigned to provide overwatch and intelligence support, essentially the role of an observer. As the team moved through the village, she noticed things the others missed. The way shadows fell indicated hidden positions. The placement of obstacles suggested predetermined kill zones. The simulation was more complex than it appeared. Through her radio headset, she tried to warn her team. "Alpha Team, be advised, building 3 shows signs of modified entry points. Possible ambush position." "Copy that intel," Captain Reynolds responded, but she could hear the dismissal in his voice. When the team stacked up outside Building 3, Sarah saw the trap immediately. The door had been rigged, and there were at least 2 opposing force members positioned to catch the team in crossfire. "Alpha Team, abort entry. Repeat, abort entry. You have a funnel trap. Martinez, let us handle the tactical decisions." Crawford's voice crackled over the radio. They breached the door. Immediately, paint rounds from simulation weapons marked 3 team members as casualties, including Crawford. The exercise referee blew his whistle, declaring the team's mission a failure. During the after-action review, Captain Reynolds was clearly frustrated. "We had good intelligence that we failed to act on," he admitted to the group. Crawford glared at Sarah. "Maybe if our intelligence expert had been clearer about the threat." "I was clear," Sarah said quietly. I told you it was an ambush. You said possible ambush, Wilson argued. That's not the same thing. Sarah bit back her response. In real operations, she would have been more direct. But this was supposed to be a learning exercise, not life or death. That afternoon brought survival training in the nearby forest. Teams were dropped off with minimal supplies and had to navigate to checkpoint targets while avoiding hunter teams trying to capture them. As they moved through the dense woods, Sarah naturally took point. Her movements were silent and she seemed to anticipate threats before they materialized. When a hunter team tried to ambush them near a stream crossing, Sarah spotted them first and directed her team around the threat. How did you see them? Hans Muller whispered as they crouched behind a fallen log. Movement in the brush, Sarah replied. They positioned themselves poorly. What she didn't say was that she had recognized the tactical signature of the ambush position because she had used similar setups herself in real combat situations. They successfully evaded 3 hunter teams and reached their checkpoint first among all the teams in the exercise. Captain Reynolds began to look at Sarah with new interest. That evening in the mess hall, the atmosphere was slightly different. Their team's success had earned grudging respect from some quarters, though Crawford and Wilson still maintained their hostile attitude. Lucky day, Crawford said as he passed Sarah's table. Even a broken clock is right twice a day. Anna Kowalski sat down across from Sarah with her dinner tray. Your team did well today, she observed. It was a team effort, Sarah replied. Yes, but you were the one who spotted the ambushes, both in the urban exercise and the forest. Anna studied Sarah's face. That kind of awareness doesn't come from reading intelligence reports. Sarah continued eating without responding. I have been thinking about what you said yesterday, Anna continued. About appearances being deceiving. I looked up your name in the exercise roster. It lists your unit as Army Intelligence but no specific assignment. That's unusual, is it? Yes, everyone else has detailed unit information. Even soldiers from classified units usually have some identifying information. But yours is blank, like someone erased it. Sarah met Anna's gaze. Maybe there's nothing interesting to erase. Or maybe there's something very interesting to hide. That night, Sarah lay in her bunk thinking about the day's events. Her team was starting to trust her tactical instincts, but she was walking a dangerous line. If she performed too well, it would raise questions she couldn't answer. If she performed poorly, it would confirm their prejudices and potentially compromise mission success. Through the thin walls, she could hear Crawford and Wilson talking with other soldiers from their division. I still don't buy it, Crawford was saying. Something's not right about that woman. Nobody gets this good at reading terrain and threats from sitting behind a desk. Maybe she's some kind of spy, Wilson suggested jokingly. If only they knew, Sarah thought, how close to the truth that joke really was. The third day brought the most challenging exercise yet. A full-scale hostage rescue simulation in an abandoned factory complex 20 kilometers from the main camp. The scenario involved multiple buildings, unknown numbers of hostages, and opposing forces armed with advanced simulation weapons that could incapacitate participants with painful electric shocks. Sarah's team was assigned to approach from the eastern perimeter. As they studied the aerial photographs during the pre-mission briefing, she noticed something that made her stomach tighten. The factory layout was remarkably similar to a weapons manufacturing facility she had infiltrated in Syria 2 years earlier. The similarity was probably coincidental, but it brought back memories she preferred to keep buried. The objective is simple, announced Colonel Harrison, the exercise director. Rescue the hostages, neutralize the threats, and extract safely. You have 4 hours. Failure to rescue hostages results in point deductions. Civilian casualties result in automatic team elimination. Captain Reynolds gathered their team for final planning. Right, we need to approach this systematically. Martinez, I want you observing from the North Ridge. Give us real-time intelligence on enemy movement patterns. Sarah nodded, but as she studied the factory layout, she could see flaws in their approach. The route they planned would expose them to crossfire from 2 elevated positions. The entry point they selected was likely monitored and possibly booby-trapped. Captain, she said carefully, have you considered approaching from the south side instead? Crawford rolled his eyes. Here we go again with the armchair quarterbacking. The south approach offers better concealment, Sarah continued, ignoring Crawford's comment. And the building configuration suggests the hostages are likely held in the central structure. Not the eastern wing where we're planning to breach. Based on what intelligence? Captain Reynolds asked. Sarah pointed to details in the photograph that the others had missed. The windows on the central building have been modified with bars, but only on the second floor. The eastern wing shows no modifications, which suggests it's either empty or being used for something other than holding people. Hans Mueller leaned forward, studying the photo more carefully. She might be right. Also, look at the vehicle positions. They're staged for quick exit from the south side. Captain Reynolds considered this. All right, we'll modify the approach. But Martinez, I still want you on overwatch initially. Roger that, Sarah replied, though she had already begun formulating a different plan. The transport dropped them at their insertion point as dawn was breaking. The factory complex loomed against the gray sky, its smokestacks reaching into the low-hanging clouds like skeletal fingers. As they moved through the abandoned industrial area surrounding the target, Sarah felt the familiar heightening of her senses that came with approaching danger. From her overwatch position on the north ridge, she had a clear view of the entire complex through her binoculars. The opposing force had positioned themselves well, but not perfectly. She could see at least 3 sniper positions, multiple patrol routes, and what appeared to be command center in the main building. Alpha Team, this is Overwatch, she radioed. I count 12 opposition forces visible, likely more inside the buildings. Sniper positions on buildings 2, 4, and 7. Patrol pattern suggests they're expecting approach from the east. Copy Overwatch. Beginning approach to south entry point. Sarah watched her team move carefully through the debris-scattered yard. They were good soldiers, but they moved like they were in a training exercise, not a real combat situation. In real combat, the small mistakes she was observing would get them killed. When Captain Reynolds' team reached the south building, Sarah saw the problem immediately. 2 opposing force members were positioned to catch them in an ambush as soon as they breached the door. Her team couldn't see the threat from their angle. Alpha Team, halt, she radioed urgently. You have 2 hostiles in concealed positions inside your target building. Do not breach, Overwatch, we need specifics. Where exactly? Sarah watched through her binoculars as one of the hidden opposing force members shifted position slightly, confirming her assessment. Left side of the entrance, behind the overturned machinery. Second hostile is elevated, probably on a catwalk. How can you possibly see that from your position? Crawford's voice crackled with skepticism over the radio. Sarah couldn't explain that she had learned to read the subtle signs, the way light reflected off metal, the barely perceptible movement of shadows, the tactical logic of defensive positions. These were skills developed through years of operations where making such observations meant the difference between mission success and a body bag. Trust me, was all she said. Captain Reynolds made the decision to trust her intelligence. His team repositioned and used grenades to clear the concealed positions before breaching. The maneuver worked perfectly, and they successfully cleared the building without casualties. Good call, Overwatch, Captain Reynolds reported, moving to primary objective. But as Sarah watched the operation unfold, she realized the exercise was about to go wrong in a way the planners hadn't anticipated. The opposing force was moving to surround her team, using tactics that suggested they had military experience beyond what was expected for a training exercise. Without hesitation, Sarah abandoned her Overwatch position and began moving toward the factory complex. She couldn't sit safely on a ridge while her team walked into a trap. Even if it meant revealing capabilities she preferred to keep hidden. Moving through the industrial terrain, Sarah felt muscle memory taking over. Her movements became fluid and nearly silent, utilizing cover and concealment techniques that were second nature. She reached the factory perimeter just as the opposing force was preparing to spring their trap. The enemy commander was positioned in a building overlooking the courtyard, where her team would have to cross to reach the hostages. Sarah knew she had to neutralize him quickly and quietly. She entered the building through a window on the ground floor, her movements careful and precise. The simulation weapon she carried was loaded with paint rounds, but she treated it with the same respect she would show a real rifle. As she climbed the interior stairs, a piece of rebar protruding from damaged concrete caught her shirt, tearing it from shoulder to hem along her back. The fabric hung in tatters, but she couldn't stop to deal with it. Her team was in immediate danger. Sarah reached the second floor and identified her target. the opposing force commander positioned at a window with a clear shot at the courtyard below. She approached from behind, using furniture and debris for concealment. Just as she was about to neutralize the target, another opposing force member emerged from a side room. He spotted her immediately and raised his weapon, but something made him freeze. His eyes went wide as he stared at her back, at the skin exposed by her torn shirt. "Jesus Christ," he whispered, loud enough for Sarah to hear. "You're Ghost Hawk." The name hit Sarah like a physical blow. Ghost Hawk was a designation from another life, from operations that officially never happened. How could this training exercise participant know that name? She spun around to face the speaker, her weapon trained on him instinctively. He was young, maybe 25, with the bearing of special operations but wearing no unit indicators. "Who are you?" she demanded in a low voice. "Staff Sergeant Kevin Morrison, formerly 75th Ranger Regiment," he replied, his hands raised but his eyes still wide with recognition. "I was attached to a joint task force in Afghanistan. I saw the briefing photos. The tattoo on your back, it's the Ghost Hawk mission marker." Sarah's mind raced. The tattoo was supposed to be classified at the highest levels. Only a handful of people knew what it meant, and most of them were dead. "You're mistaken," she said, but her voice lacked conviction. Morrison shook his head slowly. "No, ma'am, I'm not. I know exactly what that tattoo means, and I know what you did to earn it. The question is, what are you doing here pretending to be regular Army intelligence?" Before Sarah could respond, Captain Reynolds' voice crackled over the radio. "Overwatch, we need immediate support. We're pinned down in the central building." Sarah looked at Morrison, then at the opposing force commander who was still unaware of their presence. The exercise had to continue, but everything had changed. Someone at this NATO training camp knew her real identity, and that meant her carefully constructed cover was beginning to unravel. Sarah's finger hovered over the trigger as she stared at Morrison. But the tactical situation demanded immediate action. Her team was pinned down, and personal complications would have to wait. "We finish this conversation later," she said quietly, then turned and quickly neutralized the opposing force commander with a precise paint round to the chest. Morrison lowered his hand slowly. "I'll help with the extraction," he said. "But ma'am, you need to know that Commander Blake is here." The name stopped Sarah cold. Commander Marcus Blake, Navy SEAL Team 6. The man who had personally briefed her for the operation that earned her the tattoo. The man who knew exactly what she was capable of and why she had disappeared from official records. "Blake is here." Sarah's voice was barely above a whisper. "Yes, ma'am. He's running the red team opposition. When he sees you..." Morrison trailed off, the implications clear. Sarah's radio crackled again. "Overwatch, we need you now." She pushed the Blake problem aside and focused on the immediate mission. From her elevated position, she could see her team trapped in the central building while opposing forces moved to surround them. The exercise had become more complex than anyone anticipated. "Morrison, can you reach the east building and provide covering fire?" she asked. "Roger that," he replied, moving out immediately. Whatever else he thought about her presence here, he was still a professional soldier. Sarah began coordinating the rescue operation with the precision that had made her legendary in certain circles. She guided her team through the building layout via radio, identified enemy positions, and directed Morrison's supporting fire to maximum effect. "Alpha Team, move to the northwest stairwell. You have 3 hostiles on the 2nd floor eastern corridor. Morrison is providing overwatch from your 6. Copy Overwatch. How do you have such detailed building intelligence?" Sarah didn't answer. She couldn't explain that she had memorized the factory layout because it reminded her of Syria, or that she was reading the tactical situation based on years of real combat experience. The rescue proceeded smoothly until Captain Reynolds reported a new problem. "Overwatch, we've found the hostages, but there's an issue. The opposing force commander wants to speak with whoever's been providing our intelligence." Sarah's blood went cold. "Say again, Alpha Team?" "The Red Team commander insists on talking to our intelligence officer before he'll allow the hostage extraction to continue. Says it's not part of the standard exercise protocol." "Blake. He must have figured out who was providing the unusually accurate intelligence." Sarah had 2 choices: abandon her team to avoid exposure, or face the confrontation she had been avoiding for 3 years. "Alpha Team, maintain position. I'm coming to you." Sarah made her way through the factory complex, her torn shirt flapping in the wind. She had found a piece of rope to tie around her waist, holding the damaged fabric together, but her back was still partially exposed. When she reached the central building, she found her team gathered in what had once been a break room. Captain Reynolds looked relieved to see her, but also confused by her disheveled appearance. "Martinez, what happened to your shirt?" "Caught it on some rebar," she replied tersely. "Where's the red team commander?" "Next room," Captain Reynolds pointed. "But Sarah, he specifically asked for you by name. How does he know who you are?" Before Sarah could answer, a voice spoke from the doorway behind them. "Because I know exactly who she is." Everyone turned to see a tall man in his early 40s with graying hair and the unmistakable bearing of elite special operations. His uniform bore no name tape, but the insignia identified him as a Navy commander. When his eyes met Sarah's, she saw recognition, surprise, and something that might have been fear. "Commander Blake," Sarah said quietly. "Agent Martinez," Blake replied, his voice carefully controlled. Or should I say ghost hawk? The room fell silent. Captain Reynolds looked between them with growing confusion. "I'm sorry, but what's going on here?" Blake stepped fully into the room, his eyes never leaving Sarah. "Captain, you've been receiving intelligence support from one of the most classified operatives in American military history, someone who officially doesn't exist." Crawford, who had been unusually quiet, finally found his voice. "What are you talking about?" "She's just Army intelligence." Blake turned to look at Crawford with cold amusement. "Sergeant Crawford, isn't it? The one who's been questioning her qualifications all week?" He gestured toward Sarah. "You've been mocking a woman who has more confirmed enemy kills than your entire unit combined." "That's impossible," Wilson protested. She's a what, Corporal?" Blake's voice carried the authority of someone accustomed to absolute obedience. "Please finish that sentence." Wilson looked at Sarah with new uncertainty. "I mean, she doesn't look like what? Like someone who spent 6 months undercover with ISIS leadership? Like someone who eliminated 17 high-value targets in operations that will never be declassified? Like someone who earned the highest military decorations that will never be publicly acknowledged?" The room was dead silent. Sarah could feel everyone staring at her, but she kept her eyes on Blake. "Commander," she said carefully, "I'm here under Army intelligence credentials for a NATO training exercise. Nothing more." Blake nodded slowly. "Yes, I'm sure that's what your paperwork says. But we both know why you're really here, don't we?" He walked closer and Sarah tensed involuntarily. Blake noticed the reaction immediately. "Relax, Agent Martinez. I'm not here to compromise your cover, but I'm curious about something." He gestured toward her torn shirt. "Morrison reported seeing your tattoo. Is it real?" Sarah's hand instinctively moved toward her back. "Commander, that's classified." "Not to me," Blake replied. "I'm the one who authorized it." The tension in the room was thick enough to cut. Captain Reynolds stepped forward. "Excuse me, but could someone explain what's happening here?" "What tattoo? What operation?" Blake looked at Sarah, silently asking permission. When she gave the slightest nod, he continued. "The Ghost Hawk tattoo is given to operatives who complete certain types of missions that require them to disappear completely from official records afterward. It's a mark of recognition among a very small community of people who do work that others can't or won't do." He paused, studying Sarah's face. "There are currently 7 people alive who wear that tattoo. Each one has saved hundreds, maybe thousands of lives through actions that will never be acknowledged. And each one has paid a personal price that most people couldn't understand." Crawford was staring at Sarah with his mouth slightly open. "You're saying she's some kind of super soldier?" Blake laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Super soldier? No, Sergeant. She's something much more dangerous. She's someone who became a ghost so that others could sleep safely in their beds." Sarah finally spoke. "Commander, this conversation needs to end. These people don't need to know any of this, don't they?" Blake challenged. "They've been treating you like you don't belong here. Maybe it's time they understood exactly how much you've sacrificed for their right to serve in the military they love." He turned back to the assembled team. "This woman has been to places you can't imagine, done things you couldn't conceive of, also that threats never reach American soil. And instead of gratitude, you've given her mockery and contempt." The shame on Crawford's face was visible, but Sarah felt no satisfaction. This was exactly what she had hoped to avoid. "Commander Blake," she said firmly, "the exercise needs to continue. These revelations can wait." Blake studied her for a long moment, then nodded. "You're right, of course. Always mission first with you, isn't it? He stepped back and addressed the team formally. The exercise will continue, but the parameters have changed. Agent Martinez will be taking operational command for the remainder of the hostage rescue. I suggest you listen to her very carefully. As Blake left the room, the team members stared at Sarah with new eyes. The woman they had dismissed as a desk jockey was revealed to be something entirely different, and none of them were quite sure how to process that information. After Blake left, the room remained silent for nearly a minute. Sarah could feel the weight of everyone's stares, but she focused on the tactical situation at hand. Personal revelations could wait. They still had hostages to rescue and an exercise to complete. Right, she said, her voice taking on a different tone, one of absolute authority. We have 17 minutes left in the exercise window. Captain Reynolds, I need you to reposition your men to cover the north exit. Hans, take overwatch on Building 4. Crawford and Wilson, you're with me for the final breach. The transformation was immediate and obvious. This wasn't the quiet, uncertain woman they had been dismissing all week. This was someone who had commanded life and death operations in the most dangerous places on Earth. Captain Reynolds, despite his own confusion, recognized competent leadership when he saw it. Martinez, what do you need from us? First, we extract the hostages. Then we talk. Sarah moved to the window and surveyed the remaining opposition positions. The red team has repositioned since Blake revealed my identity. They're testing us now, seeing if I'll operate according to my real capabilities or maintain my cover. As they prepared for the final phase, Crawford finally found the courage to speak. Martinez, ma'am, I owe you an apology. Sarah looked at him directly. Sergeant Crawford, you treated me based on what you observed. That's not something to apologize for, but it is something to learn from. The extraction went flawlessly. Sarah's commands were precise, her tactical awareness was perfect, and her team moved with a coordination they hadn't achieved in the previous exercises. Within 15 minutes, all hostages were secured and the opposition forces neutralized. After the exercise debriefing with the other teams, Sarah found herself alone with her squad in the mess hall. The other participants were celebrating their various successes, but her team sat quietly, still processing what they had learned. Anna Kowalski approached their table, having heard rumors about what had happened during the exercise. I heard there was some excitement during the hostage rescue, she said, settling into a chair across from Sarah. You could say that, Captain Reynolds replied. Anna studied Sarah's face. So my instincts were correct. You are not just Army intelligence, Sarah sighed. There was no point in maintaining the pretense now. No, I'm not. What exactly are you? Hans Muller asked quietly. Sarah looked around the mess hall, confirming that their conversation couldn't be overheard. I'm what's called a black operative, someone who handles situations that require complete deniability. My official records show Army intelligence because that provides useful cover for certain types of missions. What kind of missions? Wilson asked, his earlier hostility replaced by genuine curiosity. Sarah was quiet for a moment, weighing how much to reveal. Operations that can't be traced back to the United States government. Eliminations that need to look like accidents or internal conflicts. Intelligence gathering in situations where official operatives couldn't survive. Crawford leaned forward. How long have you been doing this? 7 years officially. But I was recruited during my second deployment to Afghanistan when I was still regular Army. Sarah's voice took on a distant quality. I had shown certain aptitudes that caught the attention of people who recruit for programs that don't officially exist. What kind of aptitudes? Anna pressed. Languages primarily. I speak Arabic, Pashto, Persian, and Russian fluently, but also psychological profiling, deep cover operations, and... She paused. A demonstrated ability to make very difficult decisions under extreme pressure. Captain Reynolds nodded slowly. The tattoo Commander Blake mentioned, what exactly does it represent? Sarah unconsciously touched her back where the tattoo lay hidden beneath her shirt. It's called the Ghost Hawk because the operation it commemorates required me to become someone who officially died. Sarah Martinez, regular Army soldier, was killed in an IED explosion in Afghanistan 3 years ago. The woman sitting here is someone else entirely. The implications of that statement hit the group like a physical blow. You mean your family thinks you're dead? Wilson whispered. My family has been told that I died serving my country. They've grieved, moved on, and found peace with that loss. It's better for everyone, including them, if it stays that way. Hans Miller shook his head in disbelief. What could be so important that it requires that kind of sacrifice? Sarah met his gaze. Have you ever heard of a man named Khalil al-Rahman? Recognition flickered in Anna's eyes. The terrorist financier. He was responsible for funding the attacks in Paris, London, and Berlin. But he died 2 years ago in Syria. He didn't die, Sarah said quietly. He was eliminated by someone who spent 8 months earning his trust, learning his networks, and getting close enough to ensure he could never threaten innocent people again. The table fell silent as the implication became clear. You? Crawford asked. Me, along with 17 other high-value targets over the past 3 years. People who were planning attacks that would have killed thousands of innocent civilians. Captain Reynolds ran a hand through his hair. Jesus, Sarah, how do you live with that? The same way you live with the knowledge that enemy soldiers you've killed in conventional warfare had families who loved them, Sarah replied. By remembering that some sacrifices prevent greater tragedies, Anna leaned back in her chair. But why are you here? At a NATO training exercise? Sarah smiled ruefully. Because even ghosts need continuing education. The nature of threats changes constantly. New tactics, new technologies, new methods of operation. This exercise allows me to observe and learn from elite units across NATO without drawing attention. And instead we spent the week treating you like garbage, Crawford said, shame evident in his voice. You treated me exactly how you should have, Sarah corrected. If my cover had been perfect, this conversation would never have happened. But sometimes circumstances force revelations that compromise operational security. She looked around the table at each of them, which brings me to an important point. Everything we've discussed here is classified at the highest levels. Not just don't tell your friends classified, but discuss this with unauthorized personnel and face federal charges classified. The gravity of her words settled over the group. What happens now? Hans asked. Now you finish the exercise, return to your units, and remember that sometimes the people who seem least important are actually the most important of all. Sarah stood up from the table. You'll probably never see me again after this week. But if you're ever in a situation where you're tempted to dismiss someone based on appearances, remember this conversation. As she walked away, Anna called after her. Sarah, was any of it real? The quiet woman we met on the first day? Sarah paused and turned back. That woman is real. She's the person I was before I became someone else. Sometimes I let her surface when I'm not working because she reminds me of who I used to be and why the work matters. And the person walking away from us now? Captain Reynolds asked. This is Ghost Talk, Sarah replied. The person who does what others can't, so that people like the woman you met on the first day can continue to exist. With that, she disappeared into the evening crowd, leaving her teammates to grapple with the knowledge that they had spent a week in the presence of a legend they never knew existed. The final week of the NATO exercise proceeded differently than anyone had expected. Word of Sarah's true identity had spread in carefully controlled whispers among the special operations community at the camp. Not the details, those remained classified, but enough to fundamentally change how she was perceived. Commander Blake found Sarah on the morning of the 4th day, sitting alone at a picnic table outside the mess hall, reading what appeared to be a linguistics textbook. Preparing for your next assignment? He asked, settling across from her. Always, Sarah replied without looking up. Arabic dialects are evolving faster than our training programs can keep up with. Blake studied her face. I owe you an apology for compromising your cover. No, you don't. Morrison had already identified the tattoo. The situation was compromised regardless of your actions. Sarah closed her book and met his gaze. The question is whether this exposure affects my operational status. That depends on what you want, Blake said. Your handler has been in contact with me. There are options, Sarah raised an eyebrow. Options? You could transfer to a training role. Your expertise would be invaluable for preparing the next generation of operatives. Officially, you'd be assigned to a classified training facility. Unofficially, you'd get to keep your real name and maybe even reconnect with your family. The offer hung in the air between them. Sarah had dreamed of such a possibility, but she had also accepted that it would never come. What's the catch? She asked. No more field operations. No more direct action missions. You'd be valuable as a trainer and consultant, but your active operational career would be over. Sarah was quiet for a long moment, watching other soldiers going about their morning routines. Normal soldiers with normal lives, normal families, normal problems. I need time to think about it, she finally said. Take all the time you need. But Sarah? Blake's voice became more personal. You've given enough. More than enough. It's okay to choose a different life. That afternoon, during the final tactical exercise, Sarah noticed the change in how she was treated. The mockery had been replaced by a respectful distance. Soldiers who had dismissed her now stepped aside when she passed, nodded respectfully when she spoke, and listened intently to any tactical observations she offered. But it was the reaction of her own team that surprised her most. Instead of treating her like a stranger, they had become protective of her in subtle ways. Crawford and Wilson, once her harshest critics, now positioned themselves to deflect curious questions from other participants. Captain Reynolds had taken to asking her opinion on tactical matters in a way that respected her expertise while maintaining her cover. During their final mission, a complex multi-team urban warfare scenario, Sarah found herself naturally stepping back into a support role, not because she was hiding her capabilities, but because she realized she enjoyed watching these good soldiers develop their own skills and confidence. When Crawford's fire team was about to walk into an ambush, she provided guidance that helped them recognize and counter the threat themselves. When Hans Miller struggled with a long-range shot, she offered advice that improved his technique without taking the shot for him. You're a good teacher, Anna observed as they watched the exercise unfold from a command position. Is that something you've considered for your future? Sarah glanced at her Polish counterpart. Recently, yes. The way you've handled this week, maintaining your cover while still being yourself, it shows a different kind of strength than combat operations require. What do you mean? Anna smiled. It takes courage to kill enemies, but it takes a different kind of courage to trust people with the truth about who you are. That evening, the camp held a closing ceremony where teams were recognized for their performance. Sarah's team had won the overall competition, largely due to her tactical guidance, but she remained in the background during the awards presentation. After the ceremony, as soldiers began preparing for departure the next morning, Crawford approached her with obvious nervousness. Martinez, Sarah, I wanted to say something before we all leave. What's that, Crawford? I've been thinking about what happened this week and I realize I learned something important. He paused, struggling with the words. I spent my whole military career thinking I could judge someone's worth by their appearance, their unit patches, their background. But you taught me that some of the most important people are the ones you'd never suspect. Wilson appeared beside Crawford, equally serious. We both wanted to say that if you ever need anything, and I mean anything, you know where to find us. Sarah was touched by the sincerity in their voices. I appreciate that, both of you. We also wanted you to know, Crawford continued, that we'll never forget the lesson you taught us, about not judging people, about respecting everyone's service, about understanding that there are different ways to serve. As the two men walked away, Sarah felt something she hadn't experienced in years, a sense of belonging that didn't require deception or false identity. Later that night, as she packed her few belongings, Sarah found herself thinking about Blake's offer. A chance to train the next generation, to share her knowledge without the constant threat of death or discovery, to possibly reclaim some semblance of a normal life. Anna knocked on the doorframe of her quarters. May I come in? Of course, Anna sat on the opposite bunk. You're considering leaving operational work, aren't you? Sarah paused in her packing. How did you know? The way you've been watching everyone this week. Not like someone gathering intelligence, but like someone saying goodbye. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment. Can I ask you something? Anna said. Do you regret the choices you've made? Sarah considered the question carefully. I regret the necessity of those choices. I regret that the world requires people like me to exist. But I don't regret doing what was necessary to protect innocent people. And now I'm thinking that maybe I've done enough direct action for one lifetime. Maybe it's time to help others be ready for what's coming instead of always being the one who goes out to meet it. Anna nodded approvingly. I think that sounds like wisdom, not weakness. The next morning, as transport vehicles arrived to take soldiers back to their respective bases and countries, Sarah found herself surrounded by members of her team for final farewells. Captain Reynolds shook her hand formally. It's been an honor, Sarah. I hope our paths cross again. Hans Miller, ever the stoic German, simply nodded and said, Thank you for your service. The real service. Even soldiers from other teams approached to offer respectful goodbyes. Word had spread that someone special had been among them, and while they didn't know the details, they understood enough to show appropriate respect. As Sarah climbed into her transport vehicle, she caught sight of Commander Blake watching from the command building. He gave her a slight nod, understanding that she had made her decision. 3 months later, at a classified training facility in Virginia, Instructor Sarah Martinez stood before a class of 24 young operatives, teaching them the subtle art of deep cover operations. Her students didn't know about the Ghost Hawk tattoo, but they could sense that their instructor had walked paths they were only beginning to explore. Sometimes, late at night in her small apartment near the base, Sarah would look at old photographs of the family that thought she was dead. She hadn't decided yet whether to reach out to them, whether to reveal that their daughter and sister had returned from the grave. But for the first time in years, she was using her real name, living something that resembled a normal life, and finding purpose in preparing others for the battles she had once fought alone. The ghost had chosen to become visible again, and in doing so, had discovered that some victories were worth more than any medal or recognition. They were worth the chance to simply be human again.